Democrats just got caught in one of the most transparent political stunts that I've seen in months. And the best part, one of their own media allies accidentally let it slip on live TV. Let me show you what happened.
Travel nightmares continuing at the nation's airports. BWI in Baltimore on Saturday seeing unprecedented delays of 4 hours due to this DHS shutdown. This as the House and the Senate pass rival funding bills with no end to the stalemate in sight.
Travel nightmares, unprecedented delays, 4 hours at BWI in Baltimore. You notice the framing here? This is pure theater. MSNBC wants you to believe that Trump created this crisis by sending ICE agents to airports to stand around and do nothing. But here's what they're not telling you. The Senate just passed a funding bill that would pay TSA workers while deliberately defunding ICE and Border Patrol. Listen to that again. They want to fund airport security but defund border security. You literally just can't make this up.
We're not going to split apart two of the most important agencies in the government and leave them hanging like that. We just couldn't do it.
Donald Trump has sent ICE agents to airports who are being paid to stand around and do nothing, while hardworking federal employees who are TSA agents have been forced to operate under extreme conditions.
If you want ICE out the airport, then pay TSA. If you want ICE out the airport, then fund DHS.
We're not going to split apart two of the most important agencies, except that's exactly what you just did. You literally voted to fund one and defund the other. That's actually the definition of splitting them apart. And then there's this little gem. Trump sent ICE agents to airports who are being paid to stand around and do nothing. Let me translate that for you. ICE agents are doing their jobs at airports. They're catching criminals and they're enforcing immigration law. And the Democrats, they're furious because they can't use TSA delays as a political leverage if ICE is actually working. The logic here is stunning, but I guess we shouldn't be surprised. What they're saying is if you want ICE at airports doing their job, then you have to pay TSA. It's legislative hostage-taking that's dressed up as concern for American travelers.
For more, let's bring in Republican Congressman from Tennessee, Tim Burchett. Thank you so much, Congressman, for coming back on the show. It's always great talking to you, sir.
Now watch what happens when an actual congressman who understands how government funding works shows up to explain reality to the fake news media. This is Tim Burchett from Tennessee, and he's about to completely dismantle this entire narrative in real time.
Good morning. So I want to ask about this, these two funding bills. Obviously, the House passed one, but the Senate passed one also. And there's a lot of criticism from House Republicans on whether Thune should have let that happen because it didn't fund ICE or CBP. Thune defended it, saying in part, ICE and CBP are funded thanks to the working families' tax cuts and the foresight of President Trump and Republicans in Congress. Dems got zero restrictions that would prevent ICE and CBP agents from doing their jobs safely. And due to the Dem obstruction of the appropriations process, ICE and CBP will get even more through budget reconciliation. But there's, from what I see...
Stop right there. This is the key point. The Senate bill, pushed by Majority Leader Thune, funded everything except ICE and Border Patrol. But Thune defended it by saying ICE and CBP are already funded thanks to the tax cuts bill. So here's the problem, and Burchett is about to explain it. That's only partially true. The tax cuts bill funds frontline officers at ICE and Border Patrol. It does not fund civilian support staff. You know, the people who process the paperwork, handle the logistics, coordinate operations, and manage detention facilities. So the Senate bill would have left those support workers totally unfunded, crippling ICE and Border Patrol operations, all while giving Democrats the ability to claim that they're reasonable by funding TSA. It's brilliant politics. It's just terrible policy.
Two pretty big problems with this. first of all, only frontline law enforcement from ICE and CBP are funded because of the big, beautiful bill, not the civilian support staff. So this would have hung them out to dry until a second reconciliation bill can pass. That's an open question. You've had Jason Smith, the Ways and Means chair, saying he does not see a clear path for reconciliation. And then on top of that, now you've got all these headlines claiming that it was House Republicans who continued this shutdown. Do you think that Thune made a big mistake here?
I think he made a huge mistake, ma'am. 83% of the population supports President Trump at Save America Act, which they should. He ignores that. And you as a member of the media ought to be disgusted at the fact they passed that thing at 2:25 in the morning and left all the other senators kind of hanging. All he had to do is have 5 of his cronies on the floor. He cuts a deal with Schumer. Obviously, the leadership in the Senate, and that's on both sides of the aisle, has a real disgust for this president and House leadership because they didn't even have the guts to call Speaker Mike Johnson and let him know what happened.
So this right here, this is why Burchett is effective. He just explained in plain English what the media spent 3 days lying about. Republicans passed a clean DHS funding bill in the House. It funds everything: TSA, ICE, Border Patrol, support staff, the whole department. But Democrats in the Senate, with Schumer's blessing, amended it to specifically exclude ICE and Border Patrol funding. Then they turned around and blamed Trump for the TSA delays, which was their own creation. And when Thune tried to thread that needle with a compromise, he accidentally revealed the whole game. ICE is already funded, he said, except not really. Not the support staff, not the full operation. Just enough funding to let the Democrats claim that they're not completely sabotaging border enforcement. And Tim Burchett, he saw through that immediately. This is political malpractice that's disguised as governing.
The whole deal of the stereotype of Congress is, and it's well deserved, is that we pass stuff in the dark of night because we don't have any guts, and that's clearly what's shown in the Senate leadership. I think they need to get some new leadership over there, in my opinion.
Now, you guys in the House obviously passed a bill before you left town, but both chambers are in recess for the next 2 weeks. And better hope you didn't make any dinner reservations or have any family plans, because listen to what TMZ is asking for.
Anybody goes to Disney World with their family for spring break, a beach somewhere, or anywhere on vacation, and you see one of the 535 members of Congress take a picture and send it to us at TMZ. We want to show what they are doing at your expense.
So basically, it's an all call to shame members of Congress for being on recess. You know these photos are going to pop up during primaries and midterms. Do you think that Republican leadership in either chamber, both chambers, needs to call everyone back?
Correct. I hope they bust some people on this thing because this is ridiculous. America's suffering. We're paying more at the pumps. Excuse me, we're paying more at the pumps. These ridiculous lines. We're forcing TSA agents to work for free multiple times this year.
So this is Harvey Levin from TMZ calling it exactly right. It's a political photo op campaign, and it's political theater. And notice what the host says. These photos are going to pop up during primaries and, pay attention, midterms. That's the whole point. That's why the Democrats are doing this. They don't care about the TSA workers. They don't care about the travelers. They care about having campaign footage for the midterms in 2026.
I think we need to get back to work, ma'am. We used to say in the state legislature, you shouldn't have hired on if you didn't want to work, and clearly they don't want to work. But honestly, I do more work when I'm at home. You know, I can't get used to those 2-hour work weeks when I'm in Washington waiting on the Senate to budge on something, and that's clearly what's going on here.
And you know what? Tim Burchett is right to call everyone to get back to Washington and do their jobs. Because while Congress is on recess, federal workers are being forced to show up without pay. And the travelers were all sitting in airport lines for hours. Folks, this is what accountability sounds like. Tim Burchett isn't defending the recess. He's calling out lazy work culture in Congress. And he's pointing out that the House passed a bill weeks ago. And they're all just waiting for the Senate to act. And when the Senate finally does act, they pass a sabotage bill that's designed to fail. Then everybody goes on vacation while all of us, we continue to suffer.
To do away with that, when the government's in a shutdown or a partial shutdown as this is, we shouldn't get paid, but we're a bunch of spoiled brats, ma'am. And, I get sick and tired of congressmen saying they can't, you know how much money I could make if I just went home and worked? Well, dadgummit, go home. More people have played professional baseball than have been in the United States Congress. You need to treat it as, I treat it as an honor. Every time I get off that plane and look at that Capitol, I get chills. And when you don't, you need to pack it up and come home, ma'am.
Well, that's an important point. But with the time we have left,
we shouldn't get paid during shutdowns? I mean, how many congressmen are willing to say that out loud? How many Democrats who are currently grandstanding about TSA workers would vote to cut their own pay? The answer? 0. So here's the reality check that you won't hear from MSNBC. America is paying more at the pump because of Iran policy uncertainty. Americans are waiting in ridiculous TSA lines because Democrats are blocking DHS funding. TSA agents are working without pay because Congress won't do its job. Oh, and Congress, don't worry about them. They're still getting paid. Every single one of them, in fact, is still getting paid. All while they force federal workers to choose between paying rent and showing up to work. So Tim Burchett has sponsored legislation to fix this. No pay for Congress during shutdowns. It'll never pass because it would require Congress to vote against their own interests. But it's the right policy, and he's willing to stand behind it. Now, the interview shifts to FISA reauthorization, which is critically important, but kind of a different topic. Let me give you the key points.
I want to ask you about another subject, too. The White House is making a big push right now to renew these spy powers. FISA Section 702, it lets the intelligence community surveil foreigners who are not physically in the U.S., so foreigners abroad not protected by the Fourth Amendment. I know you've opposed this in the past, in part because if Americans are texting with a suspected terrorist, their communications can be swept up too. But the president posted this. Fact is, whether you like FISA or not, it's extremely important to our military. I've spoken to many generals about this. They consider it vital. Not one said even tacitly they can do without it, especially right now with our brilliant military operation in Iran. Are you going to support FISA reauthorization this time around?
Well, as you know, I love our president, and he's probably one of the only people in Washington, D.C. that can get my name right in the media or in politics. But I've had some reservations in the past because, say there's a fellow working on your roof who's not an American citizen, here legally, but they have questions about him, and they go get a FISA warrant. And in the past, there's been a super high number of those been approved. They're rarely ever not approved. And they want to get at Tim Burchett. So what do? They hop on this guy's phone, this cell phone, this guy who's working on my roof, because guess what? He has my phone number in his, or he's talked to me, and they backdoor a search on me. And that's the way it's been abused. If they can prove to me that it's not being abused, then I could be on board with this. But the Fourth Amendment, ma'am, we take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and all of a sudden, this is okay. Somebody's going to have to show me what the difference is.
Yeah, and I hear what you're talking about.
The White House wants to renew warrantless spy powers, and Burchett is skeptical, and he should be. These powers have been abused over 100,000 times under Joe Biden. They were used to spy on Donald Trump's campaign. They were used to target parents at school board meetings. And now the argument is, trust us. We're only going to use it for the terrorists overseas. Burchett's response is perfect. Prove it. Show me you won't abuse it. Show me that there are real safeguards. Show me this isn't just another tool to target American citizens who disagree with whoever the regime is.
What you're talking about, I believe, is Title I of FISA, which does require warrants. We know that there was a lot of scrutiny on how those warrants were abused during the whole Carter Page thing. I mean, the president has sounded off on this, but Section 702 is a different authority. You know, Title I actually is permanent law.
Correct.
It does not need to be renewed, ironically enough. 702 deals with foreigners who are overseas, not in the U.S. So you'd have to basically be texting with a terrorist in a foreign country to have your communications swept up. And the intelligence community's argument is, we've already collected all this data lawfully. If we require a warrant to look at it, now we're going to hamper the response time to thwart a terror plot. So will you, I guess, go for a briefing to try to get to the bottom of this? Because it does expire next month, and there's a lot of urgency around it to get it renewed.
It does, but they've not done a very good job of selling it to the American people or to Congress, ma'am. It's been abused over 100,000 times a year under the Biden administration. So somebody's going to have to prove to me that this is just not another avenue. And how do you identify somebody as a terrorist? Just because somebody's foreign and they're overseas doesn't make them a terrorist.
Here's the problem with warrantless spying. Once you give the government that power, well, they're going to abuse it. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. The FBI had a 99.7% success rate in getting warrants through the FISA courts when they actually applied for them. So if warrants are that easy to get, why do they need a warrantless option? Well, the answer is because warrants require evidence, and they don't always have the evidence. They want to spy first and then find evidence later. And that's completely backwards. That's completely un-American. And that's why Tim Burchett is right to oppose it. Just because someone's foreign and overseas doesn't exactly make them a terrorist. Exactly. And just because someone disagrees with the Biden administration's policies doesn't make them a domestic threat. That's exactly how these powers have been used against parents, against Catholics, against Donald Trump supporters, against anyone the regime decides is a problem. So when the White House comes asking for more surveillance power, the answer should be a hard no until we start to see real reforms, real accountability, and real consequences for all of the past abuses.
Success for achieving these warrants in the past, they're going to have to prove to me that it's legit and not just another avenue to go after American citizens. We've had members of law enforcement that come out completely against this, and so we need to have some proof.
Well, it is it's a hard topic to understand. It gets conflated a lot. It's kind of in the weeds. So we hope to do more on it on this show because it's an important issue, but obviously a lot of open questions around it. So thank you very much, Congressman Burchett, for joining us again. Always appreciate talking to you, sir.
And you notice how this host ends this? Well, it's kind of a hard topic, and it's in the weeds, and we'll just do more on this later. Translation. This makes our side look bad, so let's kind of move on. So here's what you need to understand about the entire interview. Burchett came on Fox News, defended Trump's policies, and exposed the Senate's political games. He called out his own colleagues for laziness and opposed giving the government more warrantless spy powers. That's consistency, that's principle, and that's actually what America First representation looks like. Meanwhile, Democrats are manufacturing TSA delays to win elections. They're defunding border security while crime pours across our border and demanding more power to spy on Americans without warrants. Well, my friends, the choice couldn't be clearer. So here's my question for you. Are you ready to hold Congress accountable? Because the midterms are coming, and every single one of these politicians, the ones blocking border funding, the ones on vacation during a crisis, the ones demanding more spy powers, well, they're all up for re-election. Tim Burchett's right. These photos come up in primaries. These votes will be remembered. And Americans who are tired of being treated like props in political theater, well, they have a chance to do something about it. So now it's your turn. Drop a comment here and let me know this. Should Congress lose their pay during shutdowns? First question. Second, should we demand actual border security before funding anything else? And should we give the government more warrantless surveillance power? I already know what you're going to say, but I want to hear it. This is important. Let's make this comment section reflect what America First actually believes in, not what MSNBC or some goon from Fox News tells us to believe. Hit the subscribe button if you want more like this. And hit the like button if Tim Burchett's straight talk is what you wish more Republicans sounded like. And hit that share button and give this to some of your friends that need to see what real accountability looks like in Congress. Our next story you just don't want to miss. We outline the latest and breaking news from Eric Swalwell and his little soiree with Fang Fang, the Chinese spy. You're going to love it. There's a great dissection of why he's doing this, and we're going to have all of the latest as the alleged FBI case against Eric Swalwell progresses. It's up next. Have a look.